The Brown Park Podcast is brought to you by Grow Clinics. They're Australia's leading hair transplant clinics, and you can go to growclinics.com.au. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Hello.
G'day. How are you?
It's been a couple of weeks since we've done a podcast because, in that time frame, my wife has given birth to somebody else's baby. She was a surrogate. Oh, no, that sounds terrible. So she was a surrogate for a friend. So it's been a little while since we've actually done a podcast, but today's one I think is going to be very therapeutic.
I think this guy is going to add some serious value to both our lives.
Yes, and also yours, the listener of this podcast. His name is Mitch Wallis, and he is our guest today on the Brown Park Podcast.
The Brown Park Podcast.
Question.
Yes?
This will lead into today's guest, right? So my question to you is, at what age did you realize that you suffered depression or that maybe there's an issue?
Oh, God. Deep.
Going deep. First thing.
I worked it out after the birth of my first child.
So what age was that?
So she's 12. So I worked it out about 12 years ago.
Wow. Okay.
So I would have been 36.
36
at the time. And then once I'd done it and once I'd discovered it, I was very lucky that I had a doctor who was from the Black Dog Institute. And he said, yep, this is your textbook. Here we go. Let's solve this problem. And then I realized that I'd been suffering from it for a long time.
Do you think you were suffering when you were a kid or?
No, not necessarily a kid, but I think definitely there's moments now that I look back and I go, oh, wow, I was depressed. I wasn't happy.
Interesting.
Why do you ask?
Well, today's guest, he, I think he figured it out when he was like 8, when he went and saw the doctor for the first time.
I had experience with depression very young because my mother had it. And I've said this before, but one of my oldest memories, is sitting at a table with my mum crying, going, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. And me trying to comfort her. And I've got to have been about 7.
I'll be buggered. There you go. All right, well, let's get into this one with Mitch Wallis.
The Brown Park Podcast.
Mitch Wallis, welcome to the show.
Christo, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. Dion, hello, mate. Thank you as well.
I'm looking at your backdrop and it looks very warm. It looks very nice and homely.
Well, my thoughts on that, Christo, is if the world is very uncontrollable, control the 4 corners that you can.
Wow.
Like that.
My place is a shit fight.
Well, very reflective. Our environment plays a massive factor on our mental health. So when the place is a shit fight, that often tells our subconscious brain that things aren't okay. Now, you can over-index on that and have OCD like I do. However, some semblance of control in your physical surroundings. When we go out into the world, we're met with this really confronting realization that a lot of what we think is within our power, it's just not. But when we come home, there has to be somewhere in the world that feels like yours, that's safe. So for me, this little living room and my 1-bedroom apartment is my oasis to plug back in and recharge.
I love that.
Right. Yeah.
I love that. See, I have 3 kids, so I don't have what you're looking at here is my tiny little space, but there is no wall. So it's open to the rest of the house as well.
But I bet you love that space right there, Christo. Like where you're sitting is your happy place.
I've only just started it. It's only been up for like 3 days. So yes, it is
do you
actually.
Love the last 3 days?
I do now. Yeah, I really do. Now tell us about the Mitch Wallis journey. You're on a mission to try and help 1 million people.
A billion.
A billion.
That's it. The B word.
Okay, so why start small?
Million with a B. No, that's seriously. I use that word intentionally because that's the scale that I want to try and create an impact at, and I'm fully, absolutely committed to doing that. I have suffered from mental health issues since I was 7 years old, when my mum first saw me doing very strange behaviors around the house.
We were listening to something that you did where you were touching the dashboard of the car saying, God, God, God.
Yeah. It was very strange, very strange. And I didn't know what was happening. I just felt as if I didn't do these things, something cataclysmically bad would happen immediately. where my whole family would die of cancer that day.
Wow.
So I would spend hours in my bedroom, like folding socks and folding socks and folding socks. And it would be painstakingly bad. I can still remember my mum dropping in the washing basket and me looking at that being like, this is going to torture me for days trying to get this done.
Yeah.
And we would go on to find that that was clinical obsessive compulsive disorder.
When you go to therapy, like I suffer depression myself and I do therapy and all that kind of stuff. Have they related it back to a particular childhood trauma? Is there anything that they can relate back to it, or is it just something that was hereditary?
Our mind and mental health will always be a mix of two factors: genetic, environmental.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there, your blend is making up who you are and how you're feeling. And for me, I would say that I'm probably 50-50. Genetically, my whole family on both sides is littered with a myriad of fun things, from deep alcohol addiction through to depression, agoraphobic panic disorder, etc. And then I had some stuff happen when I was younger that kind of screwed me up a little bit, whereas now as an adult, both my biology has caught up and stabilized, and through lots and lots of therapy, I've been able to reintegrate and find a plateau of healing I never thought possible.
It's amazing the amount of people that suffer depression and everything still don't believe in therapy.
Yeah. You see it all the time. It's crazy, isn't it? It's like they can deal with it themselves, but it just amplifies as you move through life and get older.
I think that the factor of that is twofold. And the second we don't talk about a lot. The first is a stigma and judgment. And by the way, there's two flavors of stigma. There is the traditional one, which is others are going to see me as. And then there is the non-traditional one, which is I'm going to see me as. Self-stigma is actually different. But there is a weakness avoidance. But then there's another factor, which is less commonly spoken about, but as real. I don't want to lift the hood up on this thing because God knows what worms are under there. And I don't have the space, time, and willingness to deal with it, even though the 6 most powerful words that has brought me back from the brink of suicide and has led me to being in this field full time as an emotional wellbeing expert. The truth will set you free.
Yep.
Yeah.
If there is a hard part, you have to go toward it. There is no round it. And even though it's going to be painful to get through, that will bring freedom you never imagined. So it's the lifting of the hood and looking at the worms that the growth will emerge.
Yes. I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think even with me, I haven't suffered depression, but done a lot of silly stuff through my life. Was diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 45. And it wasn't until I started talking to a therapist when I sat down with him and we started unpacking some things, and I just burst into tears, and he's like, this is where we need to be. We need to figure out this because you're repressing all of these feelings that you even didn't know you had. So it's not just related to depression. It's across the ADHD scope as well. Until you lift the hood, you can't actually truly progress.
Just on that, Dion, I think that's a really important message to get out there is late adult diagnosis of ADHD and the implications that can have on character, because you eventually for decades build this narrative of there is something really wrong with me and I'm less than. I'm obviously a really bad friend because I never get back to people. I'm obviously really bad at working. I can't achieve because these tasks don't get done, and shame. And it's, I guess when that diagnosis comes, there's a little bit like someone's just unlocked the door to the lion's cage and gone, you're not this monster. There's just stuff happening inside your body. You're actually fine. You just need to learn to work with yourself. And I'm sure that was a big pivotal moment for you.
It really was. And we've spoken about it on the podcast before, but when it happened, the validation that I felt in like all the years through school, getting told I was naughty and, focus, look here. It was quite the revelation for me, and it's changed everything.
Amen.
Having said that, though, you were always a good friend.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Like there wasn't
That's
wasn't a problem with that kind of thing. There was it was more you could just see. You could see that he was a wild child.
Yeah.
But like my mind would always be pinging everywhere. You could talk to me and I'd be like, you need to focus. And by the time somebody finished talking, I was that busy trying to focus that I didn't hear a goddamn word they said.
Yeah.
You're very much like that classic Simpsons moment where Homer was standing there having a conversation. He goes, "Oh, look, that dog's got a fluffy tail."
Yeah, the squirrel.
The squirrel.
The squirrel. Yeah, squirrel. That's it. I want to talk about. I don't know whether you want to talk about this, but you mentioned in there
Go
that
ahead,
you had a trauma that caused all of this, and that's the one thing that a lot of people have in their therapy. They unlock the trauma. Will you talk about what happened to you?
Yeah, I mean the details probably isn't overly helpful, but I'll kind of go toward it as much as what's therapeutic for listeners.
Yeah.
First of all, let's define that word. I think for me, it's an adverse event that shakes your sense of self and causes distress that, if not processed, will fragment later in life. So with that definition, therefore, we can start to open up a conversation that if you didn't go to war, you can still have some type of these events in your life. And ones that probably are less known is complex traumatic events, which often include relationship fractures. So a lack of nurturance from your parents, or the inability to feel seen, heard, understood, unconditionally loved, the over-discipline, the strict environment of rigidity where things aren't spoken about, usually from an alcoholic grandparent, causing this silence in the system. There's so many things that we just experience as life. And by the way, even though I have a charity called Heart on my sleeve and I'm the feelings guy, I'm a massive fan of building resilience and not just being a passive character in your narrative.
Yeah.
That said, I think there's this particular age that tends to fuck people up, and it's between probably 5 and 7 or 8. If shit goes down then, you've got a lifetime of adult unpacking. And I don't mean that from a literature perspective. I don't have the studies on hand to triangulate that. But anecdotally, most people will come back to those years. And for me, my parents had got divorced when I was 2. And my dad had moved away for work. And again, part of talking about my trauma is not mine to talk about, because it involves partly my dad and him not working through some of his stuff. And there was no acute episodic thing, but there was moments where some stuff went down, and in retrospect, a complete disorganization of my attachment style occurred because of the way certain things were handled. And deep stories were built in my mind that I was just the worst person in the world.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what, enough genetic predisposition and enough pressure, that's where the OCD started. You're the worst person in the world. You're possessed by the devil. And unless you do these superstitious, ritualistic behaviors, you will continue to be overwhelmed by this monster that's inside you. And I was convinced I was like possessed. I felt that much of a bad person. And that, as I said, is from stories that I would tell myself based on events that happened when I was younger.
Oh, right. So when you went to the therapist with your mum at the age of 7, was it 7 or 8?
About that time. I don't know the exact age. It's the sensitive period for sure.
Yeah. So then when you went to the therapist and he, I guess, diagnosed you, how was that for you and your mum at that time?
So I walked out the doctor's office and I looked up at my mum, and she's my best friend. Like, the reason I'm still alive is because of her. She is my angel. But I remember that moment of looking up at her and her being like overwhelmed with emotion. And that was the thing where I'm like, mask up. I now need to pretend, because whatever people are seeing is hurting them, the person I love most, and myself. And so I got really good at burying that, like as far down as it could possibly go. And somehow at that age, I managed to almost nip all the visible compulsions in the bud.
Because you saw your mum
very
cry.
hard to do. Correct.
Wow. Yeah.
It would be like someone coming off a drug addiction cold turkey. I was almost able to instantly stop the compulsions, but because I didn't therapeutically work on that, that just became a furnace for that to grow and morph into different things over time.
So what were you like in your teenage years then? If this was going down when you were 7 and 8, and you said, the furnace was burning inside, what were you like during your teenage years?
I'll answer that directly, but I'll preface it with strong humility that I'm saying this from what it was seen as, not what I saw myself to be. But had the hottest girl in school, played lots of sport, academically was in the top 2% of the country, normal guy, party. I was a DJ playing all the nightclubs around Sydney. You would look at me and be like, that guy has it all. And on top of that, not to get too woke, but I genuinely believe living a life of privilege, straight white male, one of the safest countries in the world. By that point in time, my parents had built an incredibly well-to-do family system coming from nothing. So I had everything you could possibly want to be successful. And by all accounts, was that youngest intern at Microsoft. I was global product manager living in the States by the age of 25, like soaring high, when that whole time broken and suicidal ideation was ramping month on month.
Wow. Yeah. So that comes back to wearing that mask, right? So you were just putting on, I guess, the facade, but not really dealing with the issues
No way.
that were underlying.
No way. So the only person I ever spoke to was my mum, because I couldn't avoid it throughout my younger years and early teenage years. I would come into a room and try and verbalize these intrusive thoughts that I was having, but even getting them out of my mouth, I'm like, my mum's going to disown me. She's going to think that I'm the devil, because the OCD convinces you that that is true. Now, I've never had germ OCD, but it's the easiest example for people to get a handle on what the experience is like beyond just tidying things and washing your hands. And the pathology and psychology of it is, let's say you wash your hands and a normal person wouldn't even consciously register they are now clean enough. Someone with OCD, an intrusive thought will come that attacks the most vulnerable thing that you want the least and makes you believe that that is true. So someone in this case, there's a 0.1% chance that there is bacteria in the air.
Yep.
So your rational brain can never, ever, ever beat the OCD thought, because there is a kernel of truth in there somewhere. So you'll wash again and you'll wash again and you'll wash again. And eventually you end up in this loop where you can go insane. And your brain says, unless you do this compulsion, I'm going to ramp the obsessive intrusive thought, which you can't disprove. So then you're bound by the compulsion, hence the cycle. So for me, if I didn't do this ritualistic behavior, I thought I was possessed, a bad person, that I was crazy, and then the cycle would repeat. Now, how that plays out then in adulthood is, I don't know. And I kind of, you're also convinced this isn't OCD, because you say, but this is just OCD. And then your OCD goes, no, but that's not true, because you're the worst person in the world. And you're like, oh, good point. So by then, oh my God.
Exhausting.
No, man. And then that's one diagnosis. I was also experiencing depersonalization disorder, which was, I would say, 5 times worse than having this OCD that was always on 24/7.
What is that? Sorry, what is that?
Disorder is.
Yeah. What is that? What is the personalization disorder?
So it's the easiest way to explain it is, have you guys ever been in an instance where almost time stopped, like you almost got hit by a car or something like that happened and everything kind of slowed down? You had an out of body moment for a fraction of a second. Have you ever had that?
A couple of times. Well, I've been hit by a car and I've rolled a car. So both of those
Dion.
moments.
Yeah.
So
someone needs to take away your driver's license, brother.
Yes,
He just needs to get a bigger car.
But a bigger roll bar. But yes, I've had a couple of moments where time has legitimately slowed down to where I'm in this moment. I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is going super slow. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So like every mental health issue, every emotion that's experienced by every person has a reason for being. They're a protective mechanism. So we all experience depersonalization in micro moments. When we're watching television and we've kind of zoned out, we're slightly dissociated, that is depersonalizing. Now, the purpose is for your body to eject itself so that it doesn't experience the conscious moment. Either it needs the computing power or it's too much pain to process and feel at any one point.
Right.
When we're super anxious or having a panic attack, we will slightly depersonalize to try and not feel what we're feeling. Now, because I was trapped in a state of some childhood trauma and then OCD, which basically meant I didn't want to be who I was. I didn't want to be in my body because it was the worst place in the world. I eventually got stuck in this depersonalized state. Now, what brought that to the fore? Now, I've unfortunately never been able to do drugs. I've never done a line of coke, never done an MDMA, nothing, even though I would love to try that experience. Haven't been able to. Because when
Welcome to the club, by the way. Welcome to the club. I've never done that either.
Wow.
Yeah, never.
As Aussies, that is very, very rare.
Yeah, very.
When I was
Dion?
16.
So you broke up. Sorry.
Yeah.
Brown
Park.
Big thanks to our sponsors, Grow Clinics, for the continued. That's a new word.
New word.
Continued support of our podcast. I had a moment this morning. I've got a party to go to this weekend. And I've got a couple of old suits, and I'm wearing one of them because I'm going as Forrest Gump. That's a separate story. It doesn't matter.
No. Okay, yes, keep going.
And I put the suit on, and I went, oh, this looks all right. Why did I think this suit looked terrible? Because I was just trying them on, see whether they still fit, see whether it was worth keeping them. And I realized that I had a preconceived idea of what I looked like in these suits from when I had less hair.
Oh, okay.
And I was unhappy with myself at that stage of my life because of my hair.
But now there's a solution.
And I didn't realize that this was a thing until today when I put the suit on. I went, oh, that suit looks all right. And I realized that I'm happier in myself because of Grow Clinics. So if you look in the mirror and you are unhappy with your hairline, what you need to do is go to growclinics.com.au and take the Grow quiz and answer 3 simple questions, and they can match you with the most suitable hair loss solution that fits you. It may not be a hair transplant. It may be the topical solutions that they have. You might want to do what they call regrow, and that is byproduct for now to accumulate points to go towards a hair transplant in the future. You can find out all about it at growclinics.com.au.
Follow the Brown Park podcast on socials at Brown Park Official.
When I was 16, I had a smoke of a joint. I'd only, this is the kind of very few times I've even dabbled in that area. And I had this panic attack, huge, overwhelming panic attack. And the next day, I woke up stuck in this depersonalized state.
Oh.
And that lasted for 20 years.
Far out.
So what that felt like was roaming around through the day. I would come in and out of these moments where for almost no reason, and you're fully lucid. I've never gone insane. I've never entered into a psychosis. I've been close. But as you can tell, I'm a pretty with it dude. I'm very self-aware.
You're articulate too. Jesus.
But that's the hardest part is I would be like, I know that this is my arm, but it doesn't feel like mine. I know that this is my house, but it doesn't feel like mine. I feel like a stranger to myself, like I'm looking through the world through this fog. And the hardest part is these 2 diagnoses or illnesses I had, the OCD and the particular types that I had, and the depersonalization. When you articulate it to people, they're like, you are fucking bananas. So you further dissociate because you don't want to be in this bananas body. And you further loop on the intrusive thoughts because you reinforce that you are crazy and bad. Hence that by the time I was in my early 20s, I'm like, I'm out of here.
Well, I mean, I guess you're right too, because you wouldn't want to communicate it to anybody because they would have, maybe said
reinforce your worst fear.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you're kind of stuck. But so were you getting therapy through the years after that initial appointment with your mum? No, you didn't.
Just buried it.
No, buried it. And the one, in very rare moments where I would, because my parents would be, mum in particular, please try and talk to someone. I would go there. I would lift up the hood and I would see what I now call as the dreaded left eyebrow raise. I would be on the lookout for it, where they would have this slight inkling of what's going on. And then I would freak out. I am this person. See, I knew it. Now even a professional's seen the bad or the crazy or the whatever. And then I would be like, there is no way in Kingdom Come that I'm lifting the hood up on this. And in all the ironies, this is now my full-time job and career.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but again, it comes back to running into the storm, right? Because you need to deal with it because you tried to hide it for so long.
So what made you then, you said you packed up and you were out of here. You went to New York. You studied at Columbia and got a master's degree.
Correct.
What was that in?
Psychology.
Oh, okay.
So to tie that together, I was working in Seattle for Microsoft at the time.
Okay.
I had then hit a point where I was barely making it through the day, which was a function of work pressure, living away from home. But your mid-20s is existential dilemma, who am I moment. Yeah. And the pretending was becoming too painful. Literally, my roommate had to carry me out of the building because I was having so many panic attacks and was so dissociated that I was in meetings with people dealing with millions of dollars and had no idea what was basically going on. And no one knew.
Mm.
So in a desperate lunge for safety, and also to really reinforce the point that I would do anything to avoid going toward the problem, my logic was to avoid therapy, I'll just become one.
Oh, there you go. Wow. Okay.
So in my spare time, got accepted to Columbia, told my boss at Microsoft, I'm taking annual leave for a few weeks to go and start a course in consumer behavior to help with my marketing. She's like, awesome. When really, I was flying across the country to try and keep myself alive. Got to class, and in the first hour of the first day, had this universe download. This is what I was put on the earth to do, without a doubt.
So was there one moment where it all came crashing down where you went,
yep, after that,
what's going to happen or what I need to change? Yeah.
And it's funny, you know, I'm a pretty spiritual person, not by wanting to be cool, but by wanting to survive, and have found a lot of solace in faith. And so often we will need to hit rock bottom before we change or something happens.
Mm.
And so after that, I broke to a point of what I thought was no return, when really that was the beginning. It was like the universe saying, we need to strip you down until you're ready to fully surrender and put your hand up and say whatever it takes. Because until then, your ego will keep you sick and it will keep you stuck. You will just sit in a shame membrane until you're buried, unless you say, all right, whatever that looks like. And that's when the miracle occurred.
Well, I mean, it's true too, because on that whole rock bottom thing, you know, when I was younger, like I say, I was a loose unit and things came crashing down for me. And I use the analogy now that like rock bottom is a perfect place to lay solid foundations to build the life you want.
It's the trampoline, baby.
Yeah.
So it all came crashing down. I'm just trying to work out the timeline. I like timelines. And so you studied psychology. And so did you become a professional psychologist, or you just did it in a different manner?
Yeah. So the miracle that I just referred to was a YouTube video that would end up saving my life and getting me to where I am today, of a random dude called Harris, who I've never met or spoken to, that in my darkest hour happened to find its way onto my computer screen and changed everything. He isn't someone famous. He just stared down the barrel of his webcam and decided to tell his story and upload it. And as I was watching it, he was putting words to the feelings, sensations, emotions, insecurities, the depersonalization, the OCD, the everything. For the first time ever, I felt understood. And what didn't happen was decades worth of pathology evaporated overnight. What did happen was a fundamental shift in the way that I was viewing myself and the world. And the kind of macro meta learning here is that problems in life are hard. OCD is hard. Depersonalization is hard. Global pandemic lockdown, losing your job, breaking up with a girlfriend. But the real suffering in life comes in our relationship to problems.
Yep.
And it's the membrane that surrounds it. Now, the membrane that does the most damage in life is shame.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Shame will kill you faster than any problem will. And when we genuinely and authentically connect, what I saw in Harris was someone wearing their heart on their sleeve.
Mm-hmm.
And we are understood by that. The shame membrane dissolves. What we are left with is two things. A, space from literal suffering and pain going away, because suffering and pain isn't just the sum of the problem. It's mostly the stories that surround it. And a willingness to go toward the thing that we've been running away from instead of avoiding, to actually solve something from the inside out. So, after that is where the work started, which was finally going and talking to a therapist and going through 7 or 8 different ones before I actually clicked with someone.
Mm-hmm.
It looked like writing a 30,000 word narrative to myself, first of all, to make sense of my life and process trauma, and then read it out loud to my parents to feel fully heard and seen. It meant starting an antidepressant that I thought was for weak, crazy people, but actually just gives you a backboard on the basketball hoop. You still need to shoot the shot and do all the work. It just gives you some tolerance. It meant going and doing exposure therapy. It meant working on my attachment style. It meant having conversations with friends that you can go out and get wasted 4 nights in a row and be fine, but I'm going to be anxious for 2 weeks after that. Can you help work with me on drinking for 1 night sustainably? And it meant doing the messy work. Everyone just tells you meditate 10 minutes a day, walk around the block when you're stressed. It's bullshit.
Yeah.
The work is hard.
Yeah.
It's real hard, but it doesn't begin until you start with acceptance, which comes from letting go of shame, often through someone else understanding you. And that's what inspired the genesis of Heart on My Sleeve. After that moment, all I wanted to do was be Harris for someone else. I was like, that's it. That's my entire purpose. So I quit my job at Microsoft, moved back to Australia, moved in with my parents, did the work. And the moment that I felt even a glimmer of the reinvention, the evolution, the becoming, I went down to my local beach, drew a heart on my arm, which is now a ginormous tattoo.
Yeah.
Awesome. Love
and
it.
Said, here it is. Here is actually who Mitch is. And if this helps one person free themselves from the stuck shame bullshit narrative of I'm crazy, I'm broken, I'm unlovable, blah, 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 and start their journey to actual healing inside out, then all my pain's been worth it. Clicked upload. My life's never been the same since. Boom.
Wow.
Global movement.
I mean, I want to touch on your heart on your sleeve in a second, but I think that's conversations like this, and the majority of the reason we do this podcast is to let people know that they're not alone and that it's okay to talk about it.
Amen.
On that tattoo, on the whole rock bottom, you'll see here, I don't know if you can see, but I've got a guy drowning on here, and then over here he's pushing back up of rock bottom. You can't really see it, but that's
that.
Where my tattoo was
Very
inspired
cool.
from all that, hitting rock bottom and then going, all right, I can plant my feet here and springboard up.
And what about your back tattoo?
Christo's pulling out all stops here. I love it. Just putting Dion on the spot.
So I'm in corporate for my 9 to 5er, and on my back I've got a guy wearing a suit jacket with shorts walking a tightrope to try to find that life's balance. Is what's on my back. Yeah.
I'm not trying to bury you, but I like you've got those mantras on your body.
I do.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
Got to do it. So heart on my sleeve. Tell us about it.
I love that. For me, it's my Harris embodied in a charity. It's this belief that most suffering and pain comes from hiding and pretending and shame. And that's a controllable factor. If all we do is inspire people to drop that brave face, first and foremost, and this isn't something that is easy to articulate in marketing. So as a charity, we don't talk about it a lot, but it's not just dropping the brave face and speaking up to other people. It's to yourself. It's not pretending to yourself that you're fine. And having some true conversations internally that I'm not okay, without then getting drowned by the judgment on top of that, the self fucking degrading bullshit that you're going to heave. I've never seen someone get sober, as an example, without going via truth first. And the truth is saying 4 words: I am an alcoholic. And that mindset, that framework holds true in every other aspect. Like, you see people doing juice cleanses in Bali and all this other stuff, and it looks like healing, but it's actually not. Healing only occurs when you go toward the pain. If you're doing something to avoid pain, it's not getting you better.
I had a chat with a friend of mine said, I want you to have a chat with somebody I know. And I sat down with them and went through this whole thing with them. And she was suffering. She's like got a couple of kids, and she's like, I cannot, I'm crying. I don't feel real. I said, do you feel like there's a fog over your life? And she said, yep. And I said, what are you doing about it? She said, nothing. I'm trying to write it out. And I've gone, how long has it been going on for? And she's like, a couple of years. And I'm like, you're not going to be able to ride this out. And she's like, well, what have you done? And I said, well, I've been you, and now therapy. And she goes, yeah, but doing therapy makes it feel weird that I'm telling somebody else my problem. I said, yeah, but they're bound by law that they can't discuss that with anybody else. And it's a great feeling to walk into a room and just spew everything you want, regardless of who that person is. And I said, have you gone to the doctor and taken medication? No, because then it feels like I failed. I'm like, what are you failing? How can you possibly do you have a headache and not take a drug because you failed your body by giving up on the headache? I said, no, you're going to take a headache drug. You need to be doing the work to get there, because it's just not going to disappear.
Thanks for sharing that, Christo. And I think that's a prime example of how the membrane around a problem buries people. Like that your friend is prepared to live in an agonizing reality so as not to show her cards to others, i.e. feel shame. She would prepare to reduce her quality of life as a result. That math does not add up.
No.
But props to her though, because obviously she felt comfortable enough or vulnerable enough to talk to you about it.
Oh, props to her for sure.
There's something in that already that she's ready to make the move.
And she actually sent me a message afterwards saying, thank you, I don't feel like I'm alone. And I've gone, fuck, this is, like we were saying, the reason we do this is the reason you do what you do, because it's so prevalent. And you are certainly not alone.
Absolutely not. And my comment there was not a judgment of her, because I was that person for 20 years. And as is most of the population, it's more just to articulate how real this is. We would prefer to stay sick and stuck in shame so as to avoid a confronting reality of a problem. But the brain isn't working in our favor. From a psychological perspective, it does not care if you're happy. It has one job. It's a risk mitigation device, and it deems risky as uncertain and unknown. So we would prefer to stay in something that is painful but at least familiar than healthy and unknown, which is why we end up, in 60 years' time being like, wow, I'm not happy, but because I stayed in my comfort zone. The number one attribute that is going to get you better is courage. And that's why I'm a huge believer in wearing your heart on your sleeve.
That's kind of like, I guess why people stay in abusive relationships, right? Because it's more familiar than having to step out of it.
100%. The brain does a weird calculation on that and says, no, this is where we want to be. It's safe because it's knowable. It doesn't actually consider things like joy and long-term relief and love and purpose and those things. It is constantly going for the next pleasure principle and avoidance of pain.
Brown
Park. A big thanks to our sponsor, Grow Clinics, who have been on board with us since the beginning of the Brown Park podcast.
We've both used their services, as everyone who listens to this podcast would know.
Yes.
And we're still living the results. I'm 3.5 years in. You're what? Like
About two?
Two, yeah.
I think 2 in October.
And it still looks bloody amazing. It's a lifelong solution to your hair loss. So
I was going to say, it would still look amazing because it doesn't go anywhere. It's not like it falls out.
It doesn't fall out because they pull the hair follicles from the back of your head that are resistant to the DHT hormone, and they plug them up front. So the hair they transplant will be there forever.
And a lot of people say, is it plugs? And it's not plugs. It's your own hair, as you were saying, that they take from the back of your head to put up front.
Like I say, back in the day, they used to take big chunks of hair follicles in one big punch, which is why they call them plugs, because they put them up on the top of your head and it looked like a doll's head. But now they take the single follicles, so each little individual hair, like they get grafts and there's 2 or 3 hairs, they split them up and they whack them up. So it's all single little hairs put in just like like nature intended with science.
And if you'd like to go and find out more, go and take the Grow quiz, find out what kind of hair growth solution is appropriate for you. Then you can go to growclinics.com.au.
The Brown Podcast.
Can I ask from a psychological point of view, because you've got your psychology degree, do you think it's a case of the times we live in that is causing the epidemic that it is, or is it just how our brains have not evolved?
Has it always been there but just not spoken about? I guess to expand on that.
All the above. I think there's a bunch of stuff that's happening now that's not helping.
Yeah.
Endemic comparison, like crazy. I was at an event recently where I rocked up and it's just this barrage of who can compete for more status online to impress people that don't matter. And the neurobiological implications of how that's feeding through the system is not good.
No.
The lack of community we're having and the move towards kind of individualism and that type of thing is not good either. We're missing that tribal atmosphere of attachment. So I think competition, fractured community systems. I think, diet and lifestyle is not a great thing either. The inflammation in the body from drugs and sugar and a whole bunch of other stuff is no bueno. But also, I think there is just a lack of connection and authenticity that we need to survive, and people are craving to want to feel unconditionally accepted, and that is very seldom occurring.
Well, we don't live in villages anymore, do we? Back in the day, we lived in tribes or villages where everyone was connected and everyone played their role. Whereas now we do tend to operate more in a silo way of living.
Yeah. And emotionally as well. One of the biggest mistakes people make when they're trying to help someone is they try and fix them.
Yep.
People don't want nor need to be fixed. They need to be understood. That is one of the greatest gift you can give to someone is to lean in, not to try and drag them out. That's not what they're coming to you for. They can solve their own problems. They can't solve their own shame.
I just want to quickly touch on one other thing. The United Nations, how did you end up there and talking to them about mental health?
I mean, that's one of many cool things that's happened in the last few years. And Christo, I really do feel like I'm just getting warmed up. I always say to people, you're going to meet smarter, more qualified human beings. I promise you, you'll never meet someone this passionate. Like till the day I die, this is me, 24/7, 365. This is my thing. And I've since built or are involved in, I founded 4 organizations, heart on my sleeve, my first child, my main love. But I'm running workshops, keynote speaking, consulting, writing books, making podcasts, creating content, using business as a vehicle or social entrepreneurship as a vehicle. So you asked before, do you do clinical practice? The answer is no. I got that degree in order to save my life. Now I use that degree to build sustainable systems that can go and help people in the form of everything I just spoke about, programs, businesses, courses, content. But the private practice isn't something that I've wanted to get involved in. It's kind of like I look at Microsoft as that was my bridge to be able to use that my past life to now create massive change and scale in this new life. So things like the United Nations, that was a small, quick gig. It sounds good on the CV, but it did happen. But there's so many examples of that. Expert advisor to the Corporate Mental Health Alliance of Australia, GQ Man of Impact, Westfield Local Hero. And that's not, again, to try and big note. It is, I truly believe if you fully immerse yourself in something you're purposeful about and passionate about, the universe conspires to lift you up. So long as you have the core seed of why, everything will unfold. Well,
just to look at your journey, people get caught up in the negatives of what's happened in the past, but like your time at Microsoft and everything that you went through has led you to this path. But without that, I guess, stint in Microsoft, maybe you wouldn't be so relatable to corporate if you were talking to corporate about mental health and things like that. So
in retrospect is where you connect the dots.
Yep.
And there's been so many moments where I've been like, that's why I can't believe people don't think there's a higher power, you know, all it's going to take is time, and things will make sense.
Well, like you say, once you decide to make that shift, the universe, if you put it out there and speak it, then, like you say, the universe, I guess an example of that is to talk to somebody about a dream you might have. They might have a connection that could help you achieve that dream. So with our daughter, whenever she blows out the candles on a birthday cake, we ask her, what did you wish for? Because we don't, back in the day, it was like, don't tell anyone you wish. But since we've been doing that, she'll tell us her wish. And one of them was to get a dog. So we could make that wish actually come true. So we eventually got her a dog. So whilst we can keep our dreams quiet, we need to vocalize them more to let other people help us get there.
I know that this isn't the main purpose of the pod, but just to geek out on this because it's super important. The biggest thing about manifestation is feeling as if it's done. It has to be done in your mind. It's not, I want something to occur. It's done. And it's not a thought. It's a vibration. The universe doesn't understand language, right? So you have to feel it is done, not think that it can be.
Yep.
That's the big difference. And if your core, I keep coming back to this core seed. If your core seed of intention is pure, is hopefully to help other people and make a difference. And if you are willing to go all fucking in on that, it will happen. It is just a matter of time.
Well, we're both massive believers in manifesting.
Oh, yeah.
Our wives catch up and, do manifesting sort of workshops
journals
with themselves, journals and things like that.
Oh,
so, yeah, no, we...
Your wives sound amazing.
Yeah, well, they are. They're pretty good. They put up with us. So,
Mate, well, look, what you've done is phenomenal. The heart on my sleeve. We'll put all the links up to this in our podcast as well. You've also got your own podcast, which we'll link to as well. And we wish you well with your mission.
Thank you, boys. I really appreciate you having me on, and I'm grateful for a truly authentic and caring conversation as two guys that know this probably better than what you want to, in terms of the familiarity with the topic. And I can tell, that you're trying to help others as well. And if Heart on My Sleeve can help you, the listener, feel truly ready to let go of those shame stories and to help one person take a step forward toward their own truth, whether that be letting go and building a new set of resilience through actively seeking help and speaking up and doing what's on the tin, wearing your heart on your sleeve, then I think this podcast has been worth it.
I mean, I feel like I need to sit down with you and have a one-on-one session, to be honest.
Anytime, Dion.
That was good. I feel like I've had a therapy session. It's good.
Yeah, I like his analogy there around medication.
Yeah.
About using it as a backboard. I mean, not that I'm on medication, but like with, people I know.
Well, you are, though, for your ADHD.
Oh, well, that's a good point. Yes.
Yeah, that's your backboard to organising your brain.
Very true.
See, you learnt something today, Dion.
I did.
The backboard analogy is 100% correct.
Like with ADHD meds, they're not something that you have to stay on. So like if I, wake up in the morning and didn't have to take, I don't have to take it every day, but when I don't, Jesus, do I notice a difference?
Can I be frank?
Frankly, you can be frank.
As a close personal friend, I notice it as well.
Do you?
Yeah. You can actually notice it. You can actually notice it.
Interesting.
Not in a bad way, and I'm not saying...
No, I get it. No, I get it.
Just remember to pack the meds for Vegas.
Don't you worry about that. I'll have double packed just in case I lose one. I'll even pack some in your luggage in case my bag goes missing. Because you don't want to spend a week with non-medicated Dion.
In Vegas. Where did Dion go? Have you seen the movie The Hangover? I don't know whether he's coming home.
He's doing something on the corner he's going to regret because he lost all his money.
Yeah. Look, big thanks to our sponsors, Grow Clinics, as always, for their continued sponsorship of the show. And if you want to find out anything, go to our socials, which is Brown Park Official. And apart from that, we'll speak to you next time.
We'll scratch you later.
Why are you happy?
Because